All right, let's start off with Kieran McAnulty on Q&A. It was a really good conversation. I've actually got several clips to play, but most of them are only 60 to 90 seconds, so we'll get through it, He was talking to Katie Bradford, and it's a really interesting conversation because Katie, and don't hear me as saying that she was biased, because it's not that at all, but she kept asking questions along the lines of, did Labor not do enough? Did Labor not check in enough? Did you guys get it wrong? There was a lot of those questions in this conversation, and they're valid, but I guess maybe I was just missing Jack Tame a little bit, if I'm honest. No disrespect intended, but there was a lot of, blame Labor. Not officially, but kind of asking the question, should we be blaming Labor? So let's have a look at the start of the conversation. It's talking around local government, it's talking around water in particular. One of the big points in this conversation that Kieran pushes is, what the government has to be responsible for since cancelling things like the Affordable Water Care Act and that kind of stuff, and what it's meaning today. Let's have a look.
There have been warnings for some time about those rates rises. Could Labor have done more to stop those?
Well, let's not forget the Affordable Water Reforms was an attempt to address the massive issue facing councils and households around rates. And so too was the review into the future of local government that came up with some recommendations around additional revenue streams for councils, because at the moment, pretty much, rates is their only option. And it's very clear to me that over the next few years, rates is going to be the biggest issue facing households. Mm-hmm. The rating system itself is utterly unsustainable. We need to sort it out. Well,
National talks about new ways of funding and financing local government. Could Labor have moved faster? Should you have looked at some of those options?
It's just a lot of this. What did you guys do wrong? Should you have done better? And Kieran, as you would have, is very good here to point the blame to, well, we did solve some of these problems and we did have things in place to solve these problems, but old Baldylocks decided to can them all, to shit can them.
You have moved faster on those local government reforms, all three waters?
Well, there were recommendations that came out of the review that the local government sector have since reported back to the government, the new government, about it. They've dismissed it out of hand. So that's direct feedback from the sector coming from that review as to how things could change to make it easier for councils and easier for households. And the minister dismissed them out of sight, called them woke nonsense. And of course, let's not forget they did reverse the affordable...
That whole woke nonsense, Chewy, about solving the problem. Solving the problem's woke these days if you solve it from the left, apparently.
Dismissed them out of sight, called them woke nonsense. And of course, let's not forget they did reverse the affordable water reforms, which would have saved ratepayers thousands of dollars a year.
Bingo.
And we were told that that was rubbish, but now already, only after the one round after reversing those water reforms, people are facing increases in rates in the thousands.
But some of that did come about under Labor. Did you not move fast enough? I guess you wasted it. You spent $1 billion.
Like again with the same thing. 3 times in a row. Was it up to you guys? Now I want to highlight this because I haven't heard or thought of this before, but Kieran has the perfect answer for you guys wasting $1 billion on water care. And he points out very quickly, when did that money become wasteful? You have a listen to this.
About under Labor, did you not move fast enough? I guess you wasted it. You spent $1 billion on 3 water reforms. Did we see a single pipe built as a result of that? You know, you had 6 years to do something.
I think we've got to be careful about saying we wasted $1 billion. At what point was that wasted? Mm-hmm. Because up to the election, things were set up. The Auckland Northland entity was about to go this year. The other entities were lining up. That money was spent to set that up. The only point at which that money was wasted was when this government decided to scrap the reforms entirely and go back to the status quo. Because all that work over many, many years, and we're talking about fundamental structural changes here, all that work and all that investment gone because of their decision. So I'm sorry, I just don't accept that we wasted that money because that's ultimately on the government.
That is such a good answer. Like, it's as if you're building a house, Chewy, and you get the plans drawn up. In fact, I did this before I separated from my then wife. Then we drew plans up and we spent, $10, $15, $20,000 on plans. And then we separated, and that felt like a real waste. Wouldn't have been if we had kept on building the house, but because we had those plans drawn up and then we had to obviously stop everything, it's a waste. But it's not a waste until, for whatever reason, it gets stopped. So they didn't waste $1 billion. You could actively say National wasted $1 billion by not taking up the plans the last guys did and thinking they could do it in a better way. But it's a very, very clear and good line being pushed by Kieran there.
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be just hammered home that there is a cost to planning and there is a cost to not planning.
Yep.
And the costs of not planning are always going to be higher because you're going to be spending money fixing all the shit you didn't think of in the planning phase. I think any engineer out there, anybody that builds something will agree with me there. Anybody that's managed a team and tried to produce something, you plan. And yes, in that stage, there is money being spent for no product because the product comes at the end of the process. And so when this government has come in and just decided to just hit delete on so much work, that's when you go, okay, that's when it was wasted. You haven't done anything of that. And then you've pivoted and you've gone straight into the same thing. You know, we've got consultants now trying to work out whether we're doing a huge long tunnel under Wellington.
Yeah.
So they, by their own thing, they are wasting money because not a single inch of tunnel has been delivered at this point.
Yeah.
It is remarkable.
Yeah.
How this stuff just turns around. And yes, I'm annoyed at that interviewer for doing essentially the same question 3 times.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't wasted because it delivered that fantastic answer.
Yeah, and also, I guess, I mean, like, I let's relate it to myself. I'm getting a bathroom put in downstairs in my house. I forked over 10 grand or something the other day for the consents and the plans and all that kind of stuff. Not one pipe has been laid, Chewy.
Yeah, sounds
but
like
that money's gone out of my bank.
You could have saved that money, just dug a hole.
Yeah. All right. So Kieran goes on to talk about how local government is not fit for purpose and the cost of water. There's quite a few conversations around water. Remember, we told you all this, baby birds. I know that the guys watching now pretty much will be on board, but we told you what was going to happen. We showed you how your rates would be increasing if we didn't push through with 3 waters. And, you know, enough of you believe the racist rhetoric of, oh, Maori water, what are we going to do? That what you're doing is you're now paying for your decisions. And unfortunately, many of us who are supportive of that idea are paying for your decisions as well.
As many other factors. In my view, it's very clear that local government is no longer fit for purpose, that the structure isn't set right, but also that the rating system is unsustainable. Now, if you look at water, it's gone back to the councils now, and even if they pursue what the new government is doing, it's not going to give councils the savings that they need. And by dismissing completely every single one of the recommendations that came from that review and the feedback from local government, the only option that they have is rates. And now, you know, I've been travelling the country quietly talking to councils, just getting some feedback in a local area. But the one thing that stands out to me, Katie, was the bloke that I spoke to a couple of weeks ago who looked me in the eye and said, I've just had to sell my home, my family home, because we can no longer afford the rates. And, you know, if the minister thinks that that's an isolated incident, he's kidding himself, because the more I travel around, the more I'm hearing instances like this. I was in South Wairarapa yesterday, talking to local businesses who are facing increases of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year. You know, they've got some concerns around council processes, but they absolutely accept at the same time that even if those processes were sorted, the increases would still be happening. 50%.
Just want to say it again. If you are a voter and you voted for the National Act New Zealand First taniwha, then this is what you voted for. This is what happens when you rip $14 billion of tax cuts and $3 billion of landlord rebates out of the pot of money. This is what happens. It has to be found elsewhere, and you are responsible for this. You, if you voted that way, are part of the reason that caused this. Now, for many people, it'll be like, oh, well, I can afford it. I'm a boomer. I've got 7 properties. You know, it's not a big deal. For others, and like, I'm going to be careful because we don't typically accept anecdotal evidence from the other side. Kieran's just mentioned an anecdotal story. He does go on to talk about a wider feel for it. But this is contributing to people finding it tougher under this government, not easier. Got anything you want to say before we keep going, Chewy?
No. Pull the trigger on it.
All right.
% of the rates increases for many councils is for water, and around total expenditure for councils is around 83%. And the government is doing nothing about it. So
The government, the government would say they are looking at new funding and financing options. You've talked there about the rating system being unsustainable as it is. What do you need to do? What needs to change?
Yep. Well, there needs to be a clear commitment to local government from any central government moving forward that they won't impose more jobs onto local councils without the funding to back that up. You hear local councils talking about unfunded mandates, and they're absolutely right. Over successive governments, they've been asked to do more and more and more, but the only way in which they can pay for those is through rates. But at the same time, it needs to absolutely be overhauled, because if we don't give councils more tools, the only option they have is rates. And we can look at other ways of the PPPs and all the stuff that the government is signalling at, but at the end of the day, the core responsibility of councils is costing them a lot of money, and the only option they've got is to increase rates. So while we might find other funding alternatives for big infrastructure projects, the core functions of councils is going to increase.
There you go. Cheers, Chewy. You're jumping. I've had a chat about this already.
Yeah, I think he's right. When you look at how rates affect local government, right? So I think wherever you guys are, wherever the chat lives around the country, you'll be aware that there is a local ratepayers group. And I challenge you to try and join that group and go to one of their meetings and look around the room who's part of that ratepayers group. Now, these guys want less rates. Every single ratepayers group wants less rates, and they're an organised block of voters. So local body politicians will listen to them. They will go to their meetings. They will talk to them before they run for office and that sort of thing. So these guys are setting the tone for the place that you live in. Now, we want to raise rates so we can redo the kids' playgrounds. No, don't want to do it. We want to get ahead of some preemptive maintenance on the city's pipes. No, kick that can down the road. And this is what's been going on for decades. And this is why so many towns and cities around the country are finding all of this deferred maintenance, the thing that's been put off because the ratepayers groups won't like it. It's all coming paid now. And this is why there's so many places out there, so many councils were looking at the Three Waters changes and going, oh, thank fuck, here is the solution. But then many councillors in those councils were like, it's Māori taking all the water, and I don't like it. And Julian Batchelor's got some good ideas. And they fucked it because those same ratepayers group thought the same thing. I talk around people that I know, and it's the city's pipes need doing. It's great to have kids' playgrounds. There was part of the rates for council flats and that sort of thing, of putting the rent up for people that live in council flats. Now, I ticked that box that said, fucking hell no. Those people can't afford rates increases, but the rates go up. The rates go up because it is the only funding model that they have. But it affects everything. The fact that it's rates and nobody wants to be realistic about rates going up.
And they're the same people, of course, that go all up in arms when a government does something that they go, oh, I don't want to put that. We don't want to put that visa bill on our grandchildren. Why are we putting those costs on our grandkids? We don't want to leave those costs to our grandkids, which is exactly what they're doing with what you've just described.
The same generation that bought their house for 15 grand and made millions out of it, the same generation that got free university education, the same generation that could stick out their hand to the government and quite happily take, and now they're in their twilight years and they're looking at their super and stuff like that, and they're going, oh, I don't want to pay any more rates. Fuck this city and everybody that lives in it apart from me.
We'll go on. I've just written down here what the government is currently doing is they're blaming Labor and they're blaming councils for what's happening with the water. And the question just gets asked, what needs to happen?
So when I was minister and the review came back, I said to local government New Zealand, right, well, here's the recommendations. I want to hear from you guys as to what it is that you support. I'm not interested in going down another divisive argument. I want to know what the sector thinks about these recommendations. And my promise to them was that if they can come back and talk amongst themselves and demonstrate broad support for a certain number of recommendations, my promise was I'd take it to Cabinet. Now, that was the opportunity to change this, and it's been dismissed. And it's been dismissed in an arrogant way. It was called woke nonsense. You know, and so it's all well and good for
that whole kind, putting a plan together on how we're going to pay for this bloody woke nonsense, which actually fits in with, remember, I've played this for what Karen Plunkett said to me about what does it mean to be woke. It means anything I disagree with. Truer words could not actually be spoken.
The minister to stand up in Parliament, surrounded by his mates and be the big man. But I bet he won't look the guy that had to sell his home because he can't afford the rates, call him woke. And I bet he won't go to the businesses that are facing thousands of dollars of increase just in 1 year and say their concerns are nonsense. They have to front up. You know, let's not forget the Prime Minister said the solution to this issue is for council to stop doing dumb things, quote unquote. I mean, how arrogant, out of touch is that? The fact is councils have actually no choice. They've got one hand tied behind their back. 83, roughly, % of their expenses is roads and water. We had a plan in place, the government scrapped it, and now they're pointing the finger at councils and saying it's their fault.
Well, as what...
There you go. Next clip, Chewy. If there's nothing urgent, we probably will just stream straight into the next one because we've got a couple more to go.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one other thing that a lot of councils acknowledge as a big problem and a big concern for them, but absolutely a sector of their voting base consider it woke nonsense, and that's climate change. That's looking at any town or city in New Zealand next to a coastline or a river.
Yeah.
You know, looking at their lower lying areas and that sort of thing, which are quite often business areas or low income areas.
Or where they've got their batches by the water.
Yeah. The councils know it's a problem. They do the surveys. But anytime they bring it up, climate change isn't real. Fucking dinosaurs can adapt. Yeah.
This is only a 45-second clip, so we'll play this one as well. Rates are still going to increase. And you know how we often talk about the right? The right will say forever and a day that government doesn't work, government shouldn't be trusted. When they get into government, they then pass policies that break government, and then they step back and they go, see, we told you government couldn't work. Well, it's kind of a theme of what they say here about how National broke the water system. I think it goes hand in hand with that idea.
But we mustn't kid ourselves at the same time. It's not going to solve the issue around rates. Rates will still increase as long as the government keeps putting it back on them. And I think that is actually a deliberate tactic. I think if you listen to the language of the minister and the finance minister and the prime minister, I think they know deep down they've stuffed up. I think they know by reversing water reforms, it's going to put the pressure on councils and ultimately households will face higher rates. And they're taking every opportunity to sheet that responsibility back to councils. But ultimately, when people open their rates bill and they see that their rates have gone up, they should be laying that blame at the feet of the government, not at their mayor.
Yep.
Because I guarantee you, Katie, at the next local government elections, there'll be good mayors and good councillors who lose their jobs as a part of the backlash from the rates when actually they had no choice.
Yes, well, actually, the one thing I'll disagree with Kieran on there is they did have a choice. I interviewed all but one or two of the candidates for mayor in Dunedin, and not one of them said, we are for Three Waters. So some of them do have a role to play in that. Many of the mayors and councillors refuse to get on board the Three Waters, the Affordable Care Act's bandwagon, and these are the penalties from it. Yes, it's a government initiative, but I don't think all councils and all councillors are squeaky clean in this. I'm not saying all of them are also dirty, but they're not all squeaky clean in this as well. It depends which one you're talking about. Chewy.
Yeah, you're exactly. I think all of them knew that was a topic that was thermonuclear.
Yeah.
Like there was so much. Like these guys, you're running for office, and you look at social media, and we know that these groups are very, very loud on social media, and are in some cases really, really well organized. Like Groundswell, as an example.
Yep.
And they can put a case that just doesn't reflect how people actually think. But if your candidates aren't standing up and going, hey, look, I believe in this and it's important and this is why, if they avoid those tricky subjects, then who knows what the fuck you're voting for. I mean, one of the candidates here in Dunedin, if you look at his blurb, he's pro cycleways and on all of these good things. And then you dig a little bit deeper, and he
doesn't believe in voting. And he doesn't believe in viruses. Not just for COVID. He doesn't believe in viruses at all.
The viruses as a whole. But you put the attractive stuff on your blurb in the booklet and hope that people vote for you. You know.
By the way, that interview is still on this YouTube page. If you want to go see it out, go look for DHN Dunedin. It's there. And at the end of the interview, he has a crack at me for bringing up all this conspiratorial stuff, and it's very clear I brought up none of it. It all just vomited out of him. So
I mean, this is something while we're talking about local government stuff, and I guess national level government as well, is that if there's a button issue that's important to you, and I suggest that for most people, climate change should definitely be up there.
Yeah,
is that you don't let people wriggle out of answering the hard question of like, okay, so what are we doing about climate change? And if they go, oh, it's not happening, cool. So what do we do about you being wrong about it? You know, if we have to evacuate an entire suburb of the city, or the next tropical cyclone comes down and all the bridges go because of the slash and stuff, what are we doing about that? You know, what if you're wrong?
This conversation with Kieran was there was lots of information there. I'm not going to play one of the clips that I brought out. It was basically him just explaining how Labor didn't drop the ball, but I think he's done that all the way through. It's like, we had this plan for these increases and these guys got rid of it. Maybe I should actually, because I think this is where he talks about building houses. Maybe I'll play it, because it's pretty important to remind people about things like the number of houses that National are going to build versus what Labor did build, because we haven't had that yet, have we? No, we should play it. It's worthwhile playing, even if I have to drop something else. Labor didn't drop the ball as a heading of this clip.
I don't know how that could be the case when you look at the record number of houses that were built through Kāinga Ora and community housing providers over the last 6 years. Kāinga Ora put a press release out this week to say that there was 5,000 homes completed over the last 12 months. I note the government's trying to take credit for it, but they didn't pay for those. That's the last government's achievement. 13 homes a day it equates to. Now, you know, when...
Stop and think of that. The last government built 13 homes a day. 13 a day. That's freaking impressive. That's freaking impressive.
If we want to talk about a failure of the Labor government, I think one of those failures that Kieran should absolutely cop to here is not calling your wins often enough.
Not boasting enough.
You know, you can see the hangover from that now, when if you look up what Kāinga Ora is up to at the moment, it's apparently gone from a housing organisation to an organisation that just wants to sit on empty lots and do nothing. Yeah. There's one just down around the corner from me here in Dunedin. I see that there's several in Palmerston North and Tauranga on the East Coast. There's a bunch of land that got built, and now the government's like going, no, stop, we're not doing anything.
No, we'll keep going because he talks about housing. This is an important clip to play.
Government's achievement. 13 homes a day it equates to. Now, you know, when the review came out into Kāinga Ora and the ministers were trying to put the boot in, they were talking about the debt. They weren't talking about the assets. And it's a crucial element.
And remember, we've done this. He doesn't mention it. The government is banging on about $10 billion worth of debt to Kāinga Ora. What they won't tell you is, though, that $10 billion got the ledger, you know, assets versus debt, an additional $25 billion of assets. So that $10 billion worth of debt is actually plus $15 billion. But they don't talk about that. They don't talk about that at all.
Put the boot in. They were talking about the debt. They weren't talking about the assets. And it's a crucial element of it. Yes, the debt's increased, but the value of the assets have also increased. We're also talking about people's homes here. You know, thousands of people, over 15,000 homes between community housing providers and Kāinga Ora were built over the last 6 years. Those are people that would otherwise be homeless. And if you compare that to what this government is doing, they've stopped Kāinga Ora building homes. They've put money into community housing providers, but 1,500 over 2 years, 750 a year compared to 5,000 just with Kāinga Ora last year. It's not good stuff.
But did you accept there was anything wrong with Kāinga Ora? Did you fail to keep an eye on them?
Again, are you sure? What could you have done more? It's not an invalid question, but just every single time it seems to be the only question.
Board need to go. You can't. I know there's the issue over the debt versus assets, but something has gone wrong there, right?
Well, I think it's.
She forgot to do the air quotes, because what she's talking about is actually an issue of debt to assets. It's not an issue.
bit rich for the National Party to say Kaingaroa is a failure when they've built well over 14,000 homes, and the National Party went backwards in the 9 years they were in government. Look, at the end of the day, and I imagine that if they were honest, they'd say so themselves, the National Party doesn't believe it's the government's responsibility to build houses. We do. And if you're going to do that, you've got to fund it. We stand by the outcomes. Could there be efficiencies in Kaingaroa? Absolutely. It was essentially a new agency. It was started from scratch in 2018. Of course there's going to be efficiencies, but look at the outcomes.
Well, did you not, that's my question, did you not look at where those efficiencies could be made, given the amount of taxpayer money we're talking about?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, when Megan Woods was Housing Minister, she was constantly looking at that. I think if they were to continue that process, then there would always be efficiencies to be found. You're talking about a massive build program over the whole country, at the same time supporting community housing providers. But you look at the trajectory now. This is exactly what they want us to be talking about, defending Kaingaroa to distract from the fact that they have pulled money from the housing budget. $1.5 billion in the...
Yes. Fuck, he's good, eh? I mean,
yeah.
He's good. He's good.
Distract from the fact that they have pulled money from the housing budget. $1.5 billion in the last budget gone from housing. 400 million of that was for large-scale projects under Kaingaroa. They're making a virtue of the fact that they've funded 1,500 over 2 years by scrapping the first home grant, which is only a small proportion of the momentum that we'd built over our time. That is bugger all. It's not going to make a dent. In fact, it's going to make things worse.
So I'm going to, before you jump in, Chewy, I'm going to play one more clip here, because the last clip is not really that valid, because I could just tell you what it is. But he also strongly, couldn't more strongly, almost, I think that methinks the lady doth protesteth too much about leadership. This is only 30 seconds, just to give you a gist as to how strongly he did reject the idea.
Elephant in the room, you are much talked about as the next Labour leader. If Chris Hipkins was to stand down today, would you put your hat in the ring?
Well, first of all, I don't think he will. I think he's doing a good job. And I'll give you one brief example before I answer your question. Every single election under MMP, when a party's been voted out, they've shat the bed. They've argued amongst themselves, they've fought, they've leaked, they've done all that sort of stuff. We haven't done that, and that's entirely down to Chippy's leadership. So I expect him to be leader at the next election. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't be putting my hand up. I'm not interested. And
she pushes, and and he just basically goes, look, I don't care. I'm not interested. So if it is, methinks the lady does. We said that about Chloe though as well. I mean, we thought, would she be better as the sniper going around the outside, and I guess if he's being, I don't know what the underlying objective is for his career, but I accept that's completely an honest answer for today. In a year from now, maybe it's a different answer. So Chewy, that I'm glad I played that bit about housing at the end, because it's probably the most important part. But Labour hasn't shat the bed. They're all still together. They're all still strong. Other things said in that conversation, which we didn't play, that the kind of polls and stuff that they're seeing today and the conversations people are having with them today are normally the conversations you hear for a recently rejected government 18 months to 2 years in, and they're getting it 6 months in. So he says there's a really interesting feeling about what's going on at the moment. But you want to have a crack at that before we move on? Up to you, sir.
Yeah, I want to say what a great communicator Kieran was in that. Just relaxed across his portfolio, across the issues. Just he looked like he was doing it easy. So yeah, well done. Yeah, look, when it comes to Kaingaroa sitting on a huge ton of assets and a lot of it now empty ground that houses were going to go into. What my concern is now, the government will turn around and go, well, why is Kaingaroa sitting on all of this empty property that could be sold for less than what Kaingaroa paid for it to landlords, to developers that will put a 4-bedroom house on it because that's where they get the most profit, and it won't be something that solves the housing crisis that we still have in New Zealand, even with Labour's 13 houses a day, which is phenomenal. We still have people sleeping on the streets. We still have people sleeping in parks and tents. We still have people sleeping in cars.
Imagine what it would be, though, if we didn't have 13 houses a day going in under Labour. Yeah. What would we be looking at today?
I mean, again, everybody seems to forget that fucking COVID screwed everything for years. Kieran talked about Kaingaroa being sprung up in 2018. 2 years later, the entire world shits the bed. And they're still building houses.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable how short people's memories are. That they built those, like if he's talking about the average of 13 houses a day, and there was basically a year there when nothing happened.